So today we'll check the component life cycle. So in React, you see there's mainly three phases of the component life cycle. The first one is the mounting phase. Mounting phase is when the component is being added to the DOM for the first time. So in the mounting phase, these three methods, which are the main methods that are being called. The first one is the constructor. So the constructor is used to initialize the state and to bind the event handlers, and then we have this render phase, and then finally we have this componented mount phase method. And then there's the another phase, updating, whenever the component is updated. So part is this part happens. So whenever the props are changed, the state is changed, so it it leads to re-rendering of the component. And once the component is re-rendered, then this componented update method is called. And then finally we have this unmounting phase. In unmounting phase, the component is removed from the DOM, from the browser DOM. So I have already created an app. Let's see what it does. Let's first start this and check what it does. Npm start. Okay, so as you can see that this is the application that I've created. So it has this heading and then a button, then a counter, and then two buttons, increment and reset. So this hide counter, this button, what it does is it will remove the child component, which is the counter component. Okay, so when I click it, so the child component, if you can see here that this is my main component app.js, and then inside this what I'm doing is I'm rendering another component which is the counter component. So this counter component is this one. So in this application, when I click on the show counter, the child component is mounted, and when I do the hide counter, it is removed from the DOM. So let's see the what is there in the app.js and counter.js. So in app.js, there's this constructor, and then we are maintaining a state show counter. Initially it is true, and then the main thing is on the render part. What I'm doing is there's this button which is show counter. If it is true, the label will be hide counter, and if it is false, the label will be show counter. And then I'm rendering this counter component only when the show counter this value is true. If this is false, then the counter component will be removed from the DOM. So initially it is true, and on click of this button, which is hide counter, show counter, it will toggle the status, toggle the state. It will, if the state is the show counter is true, it will change it to false, and if it is false, it will change it to true. Okay, so and in the counter.js, what we are maintaining a state which is the count, and we have binded the event listeners on the constructor. Then for the demo purpose, I have written all the methods, the component did mount method, and then this component did update method, and then component will unmount method to demonstrate how the child component is being added to the DOM and updated and removed from the DOM. In this child component, if you see on the render, we are showing simply the state, which is this state that we have uh, initialized in the constructor, and then we have two buttons, which is increment and reset. So in the application, you see the upper half till the hide counter, it is coming from the app component, and the lower part, which is the count and these two buttons, this is coming from the counter.js file. So initially, let's see how it works. When I refresh the screen, go to the console. So for every method, what I'm doing, I've just consoled out that which method is being called. So you see, in uh, only the counter.js file in counter component, I have used these methods, not in the app component. So this is where for the first time when the whole application is rendered, you can see that in app.js the show counter is initially true, and what it does is it called further the counter component. So in counter component, what we have is this constructor. So the constructor is called for the the first method that is called is this constructor. You can see this constructor is called, and then render is called. The second method, the render is called, and then finally the component mount is called. So component mount method is here, and this component mount method is called. Now we have both the app component and the counter component which have been added to the DOM. So if you want to see the DOM, you can go to the elements and see here. So here we have this heading H1 button. These three things are coming from the counter component. Okay, so now when I make any changes in the child component, which is the counter component, if I click on the increment, this counter value is increased. Okay, and you can see that only this part, this h1 is changing, not the upper part. It will not change. Okay, and when you see the console on updating the component, the child component, what happens is this render is called. Okay, so re-rendering happen whenever you change the state. Whenever you do the set state, the re-rendering happens. So render is called, and then component did update is called. And then if I again click on the increment, you can see here again that render is called, and then this component did update is called again. And here you can check the h1 how it is changing. It is 2 3 4, and only now the constructor is not called and any other method is not called. It's just the re-rendering is happening and the component update is called. Okay, so even on reset, the it is similar to updating the component, the counter component that we have as a child component. Now when I do the height counter, so see what this height counter is doing here in app.js. This height counter is simply toggling the state. It is making this show counters value to false. Okay, so when it is false, then the counter is no longer rendered. So this is not needed. So I'm making changes on the parent component, and the child component will now be removed from the DOM. So you can see here when I click on the hide counter, so component unmounted and removed. This method, the only method that is called in the counter.js is component will unmount. This method is called when the component is removed from the DOM. So if you want to see the DOM, just go to the elements and see here. Now we don't have the we don't have the child component, so it has been removed. Now if I want to again render the child component, so let's see, I'll do show counter, and now you can see again the constructor is called of the child component, and then the rendering has happened, and then finally this component that mount method is called. Okay, so if we try to understand it from the diagram, we have this diagram here. So the mounting phase is has the constructor, and then this render method, and then finally this component mount. So this is the sequence of the methods that are called, and then once it is mounted in the updating phase, if any state has changed, so it will re-render the component, and then finally this component update method, this method is called, and then finally in unmounting phase, the only method that is called is component will unmount. So we if we want to do any side effects are like fetching data from some API, and doing some asynchronous work, you can say, setting timer, these kind of things we can do in these last method, which is the component did mount in case of mounting, in case of updating, component did update, and then in unmounting, the component will unmount. Inside this component will unmount, we can clean up the resources. Like we can clear the interval, we can do the disconnect the network connection. All these things we can do here. So I hope you understand the concepts, and if you have any doubt, you can write it down on the comment section. I will share the GitHub link to download this code. You can download it and run it on your computer. And thank you very much for watching the video. And if you like the video, then do subscribe and let me know on what subjects, on what concepts you want to see more videos. Thank you.